Hi, everybody. I know it's been a little while, and I wanted to touch back in because I've been thinking a lot about anger and the different thoughts that a lot of people have about it. And I hear really frequently that people will say, well, anger is like a secondary emotion. If you're angry, you need to like dig beneath that and you need to really think about what you're actually feeling because usually that's grief and usually that's hurt. And while I think that that's true in many circumstances, I also think that anger is kind of getting a bad rap. I think in our society, particularly for women, but I've heard quite a few men talk about this as well, we don't give ourselves permission to be angry. We seem to feel like it's a bad emotion to have or a negative emotion, or it means that we're not really in touch with our actual emotions. So I wanted to just talk a little bit about that today and clear some of that up. I think the first thing that I really want to say about anger is that it is necessary, that it's one of our fundamental emotions, and just like with any other emotion, it actually serves a purpose. If we don't have access to our anger, it's really difficult for us to be able to be self-protective. If you think about it, like, let's say that you had a child in front of you and somebody did something really horrible to that child. Let's say that somebody comes up and hits that child. Your response probably would be anger. Like, how dare you do that? You don't get to do that to that child. Like, that child is under my protection, at least now, and you need to back up because that's not acceptable to me. That's anger, and I would almost call that like indignation. It's like it's a boundary. How dare you? You don't get to. So we can recognize that when it comes to protecting other people. Usually, we can recognize that when it comes to protecting, especially children. But for whatever reason, we don't recognize that that is valid when it comes to protecting ourselves. If somebody does something to cross a boundary, it's probably going to make you angry, and it probably should make you angry, and that makes sense. And that is communicating to you that you need to do something about it and set a boundary and actually identify that that doesn't get to fly and that's not going to be able to happen again. Now, I do want to make sure that we're distinguishing between like indignant anger, which is like the boundary setting, and identifying like this isn't okay with me, and something that I'm going to call a rage. I feel like rage is something that gets built up over a long time. Rage is something that starts feeling like an inferno inside of you that's just going to like burn you up and spit you out. It feels like it's something that's all consuming and that it's just under the surface all the time. And so just the smallest thing can create this rage response from you. Now, that I'm not going to say that that is not a normal way to feel, because I think that trauma creates that experience for a lot of people, and we can absolutely process through that. It's not a comfortable experience and it doesn't feel good, so I'm not going to say we want to cultivate it at all, but we do absolutely want to process through those feelings as well. So rage is actually communicating something to us too. It's just probably not necessarily communicating as much about what just happened as it is about communicating what has happened to you before and the fact that you haven't processed that in a long time. But indignation is an idea. It's an opportunity for you to check in with yourself. If you feel really like, that's not okay with me. Like, I don't like that. If you start feeling that way, that's a really, really good time to sort of check in with yourself. You can remove yourself from the situation if you need to before you even respond. Check in with yourself and ask yourself the question, do I have a boundary that just got crossed here? And if so, how? And then you get to decide how you're going to respond to it. So another thing that I hear from my clients sometimes when I talk about anger with them is that they feel like their anger is dangerous, or their anger is a black hole that they're going to fall into and never be able to crawl out. Or some people even will say, like, my anger is violence. It comes out as either verbal or physical violence, and therefore it's unacceptable. And my answer to that is, first of all, anger and violence, either verbal or physical, are two very different things. One might typically precipitate another, but they are still separate. And being able to communicate your anger effectively and verbally is a really important part of being able to distinguish further. Being able to set boundaries and maintain boundaries, communicate when something is not okay with you, that's a really big part of being able to not act out your anger in a way that's going to be damaging, either to you or to someone else, or potentially just to your relationships. So I thought that I would check in and just kind of drop this here. If anybody has any comments, questions, or maybe disagrees with me, I'm happy to engage with that. I think this is, pretty interesting stuff, and I've been talking about it a lot lately. So I'm happy to talk about it more. I hope you're all doing well, and I'll talk to you soon.